News broke late yesterday morning when I was on the air with the Lock Shop about the passing of Bob Cole at the age of 90, and it led to so many great tributes, trips down memory lane yesterday. I thought one of the best guys to probably talk about the legacy of Bob Cole would be Chris Cuthbert, who obviously is with Sportsnet, calling that Leafs Bruins series right now, and he joins us on the show this morning. CC, appreciate the time. How you doing, sir?
Lieutenant, good to be with you. Doing well, and yesterday was a sad day, but it was a celebration too, and I think we continue to celebrate a legendary guy.
We were just talking about it with Jamie McLennan as well. By the way, Noodles told me to say hi to you, so hello from Jamie McLennan. He was excited that you were coming on today. 90 years old, a hell of a run for Bob Cole. When did you and Bob first cross paths? How far back do we have to go on that one?
Geez, I'd have to think about that. The funny thing, as you know, as a play-by-play guy, you often don't cross paths a lot with other play-by-play guys because we're always in our own building. So, you know what? I've told the story a few times. We would cross paths at the All-Star game.
Okay.
And so they bring in us to do the skills, and Bob and Harry would do the All-Star game. And usually on the Thursday night, there'd be a little bit of social activity, and we'd all get together. And Bob was such a legend that we'd have this receiving line. And so everybody'd go down the line, shaking hands with Bob, and he'd go, "Chris, boy, good to see you. Things are going good." And it was funny because the one I remember in particular, there had been a big takeout in the Globe and Mail on Bob, and one of the guys interviewed for it was Scott Russell, who was on our crew. And Scott had been quoted as saying, Bob's this legend, great guy, a little idiosyncratic, because Bob was. And he had his mannerisms, and everybody's kind of does their own Bob Cole. And anyway, we're in the receiving line and handshakes all around. And as soon as Scott got to Bob, the hand got pulled back, and Bob goes, "Scott, idiosyncratic? What the heck was that?" Although he didn't quite say what the heck.
Yeah.
But and Scott kind of was okay. But Bob was just a larger than life figure from the start. And he goes back so far that when I was still a young guy watching every Saturday night, he was. So it was back that way. What fascinates me is he walks into Foster Hewitt's office and throws down a tape and says, "Could you give me a critique?" And basically walked out as the heir apparent to Foster. So in 90 years, forget about the House of Windsor in England. In 90 years, hockey commentating royalty was Foster Hewitt and Bob Cole, with very little separation in between. Over 90 years, that's, it's amazing.
Well, and Chris, Greg Millen said it's almost like a symphony to hear him call a game. And it was obviously a unique style, but I know you, and following him and growing up and doing what you've done, both CFL, NHL, and elsewhere, what did you kind of, as watching him, what's that one thing that you can say today in terms of just carrying himself in public or during his calls technically that you've kind of picked up on and always kind of had with you during that time since your first blush with him and up until present day?
Well, the game was the most important. It wasn't about Bob. And it's great that it's about Bob in the last 24, 48 hours. But when Bob was doing the game, it was about the game. It was about the star players. He had a great quote about, give me a game with two hot goaltenders and it'll be a great game. He would have been so good handling Connor McDavid in his prime now, and it's too bad he hasn't had that opportunity because, man, that would, for me, great broadcasters, they get the hair on the back of your neck standing up, and nobody was better at that than Bob. And Bob had that great ability when the game was on the line, when the best players were stepping up. How many times have I watched the Mariel goal against Minnesota in the 91 Stanley Cup final? Because to me, that is broadcasting perfection. And that is Bob Cole at his best, because it gave us every element of what makes Bob so good. So, nobody's going to have a better voice than Bob. I kind of called it like the Stradivarius of hockey broadcast voices, but it wasn't just the voice. It's the cadence, it's the anticipation, and knowing the moment and making the most of it.
I must have watched the Mariel goal because yesterday we were on the air later in one of our other shows when the news broke that he'd passed. And, people text in right away and they're like, what's the call? What's the one? I was like, it's the Mariel Lum call against the Minnesota North Star. I mean, there's a lot of other ones as well. But I watched that a bunch last night. We played it earlier this morning on the show as well. And you're right. Like he could ramp it up. And I mean, the phrasing and some of the wording was always spectacular as well. But he could ramp it up, and you do a good job of it as well. I'm still working on it at times. But he could do a good job of ramping it up without screaming or yelling or going over the top, right? Which is tough to do. That's tough to do.
He had this theory, and I'm still trying to figure it out, but he would talk about 4 levels. He thought there were just 4 levels of your broadcast cadence or whatever, and I don't know. He was at another level on all that, but he had that ability even at level 1 to make it sound important. But you're right, level 4, that Mariel Lum moment, he's not screaming and yelling like most of us would, that we just lose our, he just had that ability to again make the hair stand up without it seeming like he's gone over the top. He just had the right way of framing the great moments.
Do you realize, Chris, like we see Bob, like the reaction to Bob's passing yesterday? John Cooper was excellent after the game last night.
Was he ever?
They go down 3-0. Cooper just always seems to get it. He nails the moment. He was great, but there's players that have stories about Bob Cole. There's broadcasters that have stories about Bob Cole and how he impacted them. And you see the coach saying, I might not even be coaching if it wasn't for the influence that this guy had on me. And Bob's at that level. I'm wondering for you as well. Like, do you realize, and do you know if Bob realized the impact on the nation, like a hockey mad nation like this, that he would have had or you have right now?
Well, I don't know about me. I'll focus on Bob. That I saw it in airports, and that was cool because it was always, and I always like, you see some guys get mobbed, but I just liked the way people would go up to Bob and just kind of say, "Thank you. This is what you mean to me," and then they'd move on. And I know it meant a lot to Bob, and every once in a while, I had a moment walking into the Bell Center a few weeks ago, and I saw a couple of guys with Leaf jerseys on, and they acknowledged me, and then they came up and said, "We miss you on the CFL." That means more to me than anything. When just because, and you've been great at coming in and what I think what people appreciate is the passion you bring to it. And if you can make the game experience 1% better, then we've done our job. And I know you've done that since getting into the chair. And Bob made it more than 1% better. He made the game just that much better. But it's those little moments I think Bob appreciated. And he wasn't on social media. Most of his career was before social media, which probably made it a little easier because now we're measured on how much we're cheering for the team that everybody's watching, and you either hate my team or you love that other team so much I can't watch you. But I'm not to worry about that, and he always walked the line perfectly anyway. So I was thinking just last night how he made impacts on every market too. I mean, you talk about the Oilers' greatest moments, and there's Bob's voice on it. Not that Rob Phillips didn't have the signature voice of the Edmonton Oilers in the '80s, but Bob happened to be in the chair on TV taking it national when the cups were raised. So and in Calgary with Lanny, and that's another thing I used to love, and I haven't learned to do this yet, but Bob had a way when the cup's being presented, he's speaking to Lanny or to Wayne
Exactly.
or to
Yes.
Ray.
I know.
And it's like you're sitting in on a personal conversation, and that was amazing to me.
That's funny. I'm glad you brought that up because that's where I was just going to wrap with. I watched the Lanny one. He's like, "You did it, Lanny."
Yep.
It's just like it's like he's whispering in his ear. It's phenomenal, man. It's just I mean, but it comes down to the relationships that he had with these guys. He felt like he could talk like that. It's amazing stuff. CC, appreciate the time, man. We'll let you get back to the Leafs and Bruins. Should be a good series the rest of the way, and enjoy the rest of the playoffs.
My pleasure. Congratulations to you guys. I know you're lighting it up in Edmonton, and you deserve a lot of credit for it. So thanks for having me.